Dad, I wanted to find out, how did you first become aware of the environmental problems in the Dead Sea region and the West Bank?
Always been interested in history and in biblical prophecy and that kind of thing. First trip to the region was in 1968, just after the Six-Day War. But in 1986, I was over there on a trip, and we were traveling in the West Bank area, and we became aware that there was a tremendous environmental problem there. That the sewage was a problem. That they weren't disposing of their sewage. They were the landfills were unsupervised. They were burning the trash. It was creating a smoke problem, and it was a very unhealthy atmosphere. And so, but that's when it all started, 1986, 87.
On your trip to Israel in 1986, what were some of the things that you learned during that trip?
Well, I had retained this fellow by the name of Doug Krieger, who had written a book and interviewed Muslims, Christians, Jews. He knew everybody in Israel, and he could arrange interviews with anybody in interview. So I wanted to find out what was going on there, what the real story was. We took a suite in the King David Hotel, and this is just one little example of how this trip, what an anointed trip that it was. This particular day, I was meeting with the editor of Encyclopedia Judaica. That's a 30-volume set of books that tells about every Jew who is anybody. And we're having this meeting, and I went into the restroom, and he started hollering at me, "Ted, have you got a camera?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Bring the camera." And I went running out, and he pointed, and here is this magnificent rainbow over the old city. Our suite faced the old city walls there. And he said, 30 years I've lived in Jerusalem. I've never seen a rainbow like this over the old city. And I said, "Well, you've never been with me." So anyway, I took his picture, and then I realized I can get a picture with Jeffrey Wigador, this famous guy. So I set the camera on a tripod, pressed the button, went around to get in it, and a flock of white doves took off behind the scene. So what an incredible picture. The rainbow, the walled city, doves, Jeffrey Wigador. So these were the kind of interviews we were having. So then I said to Mr. Krieger, I said, I want to know what the Dead Sea is all about. So he arranged a meeting with the managers of the Israel Chemicals, which was doing all the potash development down on the Dead Sea. So we're driving down along the Dead Sea, right around the En-Gedi, which is about the middle of it. And this little village that's in the Bible called En-Gedi. And at this point, Doug points over to the lake and he says, "One day there'll be fish in there." And I said, "Doug, you're crazy." I said, "That's one of the most toxic bodies of water on earth. It can't possibly hold fish." And he says, "Do you believe the Bible?" And I said, "Yes." So we stopped the car, he pulls out the Bible, and I read Ezekiel 47, and it says very clearly that there's going to be, in the last days, there'll be fishing in the Dead Sea. And so now I'm very perplexed because the Bible is telling me something that can't possibly happen. So I said, "Do the Jews know anything about this?" He said, "Yes. They have tried to fill the Dead Sea with water from the Mediterranean, which actually would allow fishing. The Dead Sea is over 120 feet. It's lost 120 feet of surface area. That's like a 12-story building. That's how far much water it's lost. And if you refill that with water from the Mediterranean, then you could have the fish from the Mediterranean in that seawater." I said, well, who is the head of this project? And he said, a man by the name of Yuval Ne'eman. Now, Yuval Ne'eman was a very famous guy. If Israel has an atomic bomb, which they've never owned up to, but if they did, he's one of the fathers of it. He was the Minister of Infrastructure. He was Minister of Science. He was a member of the Knesset minister. Had his own political party, 6 or 7 people in it. So 2 days later, I'm meeting with Yuval Ne'eman in the Knesset. Now, the Knesset has 2 restaurants. One that just for anybody, and the other's for members only. We're in the members-only restaurant. Nothing but Knesset members in there. And I'm talking with Mr. Ne'eman, and I'm asking him about this project, which had been canceled about 3 years earlier. This was 87, I think, and they had canceled the project in 1983. And so he explained how they were doing it, that the idea was to put a tunnel from somewhere south of Tel Aviv. Well, they actually had 5 different routes that they could put tunnels through and fill the water with the Dead Sea. And so he invited me over to his office to discuss the issue. 2 days later, we're meeting in his office, and this man excused himself, went back and came back with a stack of papers about this high. And he said that these were the results of the $35 million worth of feasibility reports that they had made on this project. And he handed them to me. And when he handed those papers to me, I had the sense of being given a baton, like I was in a relay race. I was the last leg in the relay race. As part of the documents that he gave me was this map. And this map shows 5 different routes that they had to refill the Dead Sea. And they now hired this company named Harza, do the Harza Engineering, to do the study on this. And so of the 5 routes, that they picked the bottom route, which came up near the Egyptian border and was to fill in the Dead Sea from the bottom. And so he gave me all of these documents, and I was very excited about this project. He came back, talked with my darling wife, Audrey, and we decided that this was a project that we were going to become involved with. So after this trip, Audrey and I were very convicted about the environmental problems that were going on in the area. So we came back and put together an organization. We originally called it the West Bank Environmental Cleanup Project. And we realized that we couldn't convey just by speaking the problems that were going on there. So we created a video. We hired videographers and made a video that became, actually, this video was very famous. It was used by the United Nations because they had a lot of papers on the project, but they didn't have a video that actually showed all the degradation, the burning of the trash, the smoke problems, the sewage problems, sewage disposal. So we came back, put that together, and this was used by the UN. We got funding. We got a big grant from the European Union, and we hired people. We set up offices. Originally, we had offices in Bethlehem. Later, we moved the offices to Ramallah, and we actually set up a program which received a Palestinian 501c3. We actually have a recognized Palestinian governmental agency that authorizes us to work and do problems in that area. And we set on doing training programs. We worked with the universities there. We worked with schools and to train in environmental issues. But there wasn't really the will to put any money from any of the agencies into fixing the problems, and they required a lot of money. And it was when we put together the idea that the Med-Dead project would in itself literally solve all of the problems. There are 10 major problems that are happening as a result of the environmental and the political issues that are going on there. And one single 42-mile, 9-meter pipeline will solve all the issues.
I understand that you also formed an organization called Center for Environmental Diplomacy.
Yeah, what WECUP, West Bank Environmental Cleanup, we realized that we needed a little higher profile program. We established the Center for Environmental Diplomacy, and we worked with engineers, Palestinian engineers, and Israeli engineers, and Jordanian engineers. And we were very unique in that time because it was during that time where they had the Intifada, and that the Palestinians and Israelis couldn't get together on hardly any other issue. We were one of the few organizations that would bring these people together. And then every time the politics would come up, I would say, this is about pollution, not about politics, and we'd get back to business. So the Center for Environmental Diplomacy was actually based in Washington, D.C. It was a 501c3. And then we set up the Palestinian equivalent of that was set up in Ramallah. We moved our offices to Ramallah. We had a wonderful office there, headed up by a Palestinian environmental lady that was an engineer. This gave us a very high profile in the Palestinian area. We interacted with government and business people there. In fact, we were responsible in 2010 in establishing a new Rotary Club in Ramallah that was attended by both government and business people. So we had a very large profile in Ramallah, where the organization was well thought of, and we had a lot of great meetings with, we could meet with literally anybody in the Palestinian entity. And so we came up with plans and training. We worked with the Berzet University that's in East Jerusalem. We worked with Al-Quds University, which is in Ramallah. We were working on the academic level, on the government level, and on the business level.
I understand one of your programs was you would take Palestinian environmental engineers and they would come over into Israel and work with Israeli engineers to solve and work out the problems with some of the landfills and sanitation in the West Bank.
That's right. We in the city called Saknin, that's kind of on the border of the West Bank. We would have meetings there with both Israeli and Palestinian engineers, and they have kind of an environmental center there, and it was very, very helpful.
Out of those meetings then came an understanding, a further understanding of the problems that you saw in the Dead Sea area and also in the West Bank area as you were working with the Palestinians. Tell us about those problems.
Well, it became apparent that there really wasn't the political will to spend the money needed to fix the problems. So as we began to think about Ezekiel's prophecy in Ezekiel 47, where he clearly predicts that a water source will come in and refill the Dead Sea, and it will cause all kinds of crops to bloom and fishing industry and all of these things, that was the one thing that could solve all the problems.
I understand that you've made a list of the issues that are facing the Dead Sea region and the West Bank. And the first one of those is the lack of water.
Yeah, the big problem there is that the whole region of we'll call it the Dead Sea Basin or the Rift Valley Basin, is that there's a distinct lack of water because, and what's causing that is they've dammed up the Jordan River. Only about 10% of the Jordan natural flow goes in there. All the tributaries into the Dead Sea, they're taking all that water and using it for irrigation, and that's caused a distinct water shortage there. Now, the answer to that water shortage we'll get to in a minute, but we'll show that there is one answer for all of these problems.
Another one is the lack of energy in that region.
Yeah, the only way that they can create energy in that way is to burn fossil fuels, and they don't have the fossil fuels there, so they got to bring those in, and that causes pollution, and it's a big problem.
What about the loss of the Dead Sea itself?
This is one of it was on a list of the heritage sites of the world, and it's going away. Pretty soon it's going to be like the Aral Sea, that is completely, you had this monster sea up in the Russian area, and today there are steamships sitting on sand there as it's all dried up. And that's what's happening here because of they're taking all the water away. And so this great cultural site is going to be lost. And it causes all kinds of degradation problems. Sinkholes are coming. There's over 3,000 sinkholes that have come up in the area because of the lowering of the natural Dead Sea. And when the rains and the water comes in from above, it washes the salt out. Sinkholes occur. It's a big problem.
What about the agricultural problems in that region?
Well, it takes water to create agriculture, and they don't have any water.
Right. What about fishing?
Well, nothing can live in that environment, toxic environment.
What about the financial problems?
The Palestinian themselves have an agency called UNRWA in the United Nations that is set aside to do nothing but fund the Palestinians. All other funding, refugee funding for the rest of the world goes through one agency. The Palestinians have their own. And recently, the political issues on that, the Trump administration has cut off the U.S. funding to that, and some other nations have as well, and it's caused a big problem. And there's an answer to that problem, which we'll get to in a minute.
Mention the political problems. You just mentioned that. What do you see as the political problem?
Well, the political problem only goes back about 2,000-3,000 years. The Arab-Israeli problem is time immemorial. As it comes down to today, the Palestinians they won't even talk with any of the U.S. officials. The Trump administration is trying to put together a plan they call the plan of a century. And the Palestinians are so upset because the U.S. has recognized Jerusalem as the capital because they've annexed the Golan Heights now, and they've done a number of things like that. So every day Hamas is creating warfare on the border. They've burned 6,000 or 7,000 acres of Israeli cropland through kites with fire bombs attached to them, and they're continually creating issues on the border, the southern border. So the political issue couldn't be worse. The problem is so bad now. The Russians are coming in, and they have 2 bases in Syria now, and Iran has their proxies in Syria and in Lebanon. And so the trigger is actually set for World War III if something isn't done. There has to be a political answer, and there is a political answer.
What about, you mentioned there's religious issues also that are
Well,
a problem.
The three great monotheistic religions all have different theologies, of course, but the one thing they agree on is the prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel is honored by Islam, by Christianity, and by Judaism. And Ezekiel has the answer to bring these three parties together and solve the entire Middle East crisis.
Well, I noticed on your video it's called West Bank Environmental Cleanup, an environmental peace plan.
That's exactly what it is. It's an environmental peace plan.
So how are you going to go about implementing that?
Well, what needs to happen, because the political entities won't deal with each other, there needs to be a district created. We'll call it the Dead Sea Environmental District, where all the parties that come in together and say, look, we're going to lose the Dead Sea. We have this area that could be a great tourist area, but we're going to lose it, and we can't work together. So how can we work together? And the one way they can work together is by creating an environmental district where all three parties, the Palestinians, Israelis, and Jordanians, have members on this board, as well as the donor entities, the UN, the EU, the US, USAID, those things. And this district, the Dead Sea Environmental District, will deal with the issues. So you say, well, isn't that experimental? How has that ever been done before? And yes. And there's a thing called NBI, the Nile Basin Initiative, where all of the parties are on the Nile River and they have a shared problem that they have to work together, but they don't, politically, they can't work together. So they created the Nile Basin Initiative. And that's what we want to create, the Dead Sea Environmental District, to be just like the Nile Basin Initiative.
I understand that you have an engineering solution that would fill the Dead Sea and bring benefits to the area.
That's what's so exciting. There is a simple answer to all of the problems in the Dead Sea Basin. And the answer comes by taking a 9-meter, that's about 30 feet, wide pipe. That's like a 2-lane highway. That's a big pipe. And running it from just south of Tel Aviv to the Dead Sea, right around Qumran. This 72-kilometer, 42-mile pipe will refill the Dead Sea, and where it comes out, because it starts at sea level, and it comes out about 35 feet below sea level, and it's still 1,400 feet above the Dead Sea, because the Dead Sea is the lowest place on Earth. And so when you drop this water 1,400 feet, you can now run it through 10 250 megawatt turbines and create 2,500 megawatts of power, which is double what the Hoover Dam is doing, Boulder Dam. It's double what the entire nation of Jordan produces. That's a lot of power. Now, we need water down there. So we're going to take this seawater and desalinate it right at the lake. And the problem with desalinating water has two big problems. It has what they call reject brine, the salt that you take out. And if you put that back into the ocean where you took it out, it doubles the density of the water, and the fish can't live. And that's why the Persian Gulf and areas like that are having tremendous problems because they have so desal plants all around them. So, but we have a perfect place to put this reject brine. We just put it in the Dead Sea, and it adds to that. The beauty of this is that this is hydropower. Hydropower is the best, cheapest power known to man. But the problem with hydropower is you have to create a dam to create the hydropower, and the dam silts up, and then the power diminishes as it silts up, and then you're subject to droughts. When droughts happen, you don't have the water to desal. But our source is the Mediterranean water, which was the Mediterranean's hooked up the Atlantic, which is hooked up the Pacific. So as long as there's water in the ocean, we can keep running this through. And when we do that, that is going to create this incredible resort property down in the Dead Sea, because the Dead Sea will now have beaches that are phenomenal. They'll have sport fishing. We'll have billions of gallons of desalinated water that can be created cheaper than any desalinated water on the planet.
You know, the news always portrays the Palestinian youth as rising up and fomenting problems and things. It sounds like your jobs program could solve that.
You know, that's what youth does when it doesn't have employment, and it's radicalized. Yes, that's a very good point. This we're going to create not just jobs, high-paying jobs. There's thousands of high-paying jobs that are going to be created by the tunnel itself, the building of the tunnel, the infrastructure that's going to be built there, the fishing industry that's going to come. That's another thing that we're going to be doing along the coast. We're going to have, there'll be all kinds of ponds for aquaculture development. It's perfect for that. All they need is water, fresh water.
As you've been recapping the different benefits of this MDWEC plan, it sounds like it really could be the development and then going into solving, working together some of the political problems. How do you see it all coming together to solve those problems that you mentioned initially?
The problems in the parties don't get together at all. We learned that when we were over there. We were able to get the engineers together. But when you get people together with a shared interest, they put the politics aside. And that's exactly what needs to happen in this area. That when we start connecting people, agricultural people together with agricultural people, and they start talking agriculture, and when they start talking aquaponics, and when they start talking hotels, and when they start talking about other resort development, and they start talking about, we want to do sailboat races down there. It's a perfect area for that kind of racing. Also, another thing, we envision a number of, like the old paddle boats going around and with meals aboard, like they have up on the Sea of Galilee.
Sounds like you're going to take an environmental disaster in that whole Dead Sea region and turn it into solving the problems you've identified, and then ultimately be the environmental peace plan.
Yeah, this whole issue is one big tart lemon over there that's causing everybody problems. And all it takes is, we'll call it this straw, this 42-mile straw, can turn this whole disaster into lemonade, and that is palatable and healthy and quenching for everybody. That's a good analogy. The problems, if nothing is done, they're taking all the water out of all the tributaries of the Dead Sea. They're putting their sewage back in. And in another 30 years, the Dead Sea will be just a toxic pond of sludge. If this program is inaugurated, it can solve all of the problems. It's the perfect vehicle to get Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians working together. It's a perfect vehicle to bring energy, renewable energy, to the area. It's the perfect vehicle to bringing renewable desalinated water to the region. It's a perfect vehicle to creating thousands of high-paying jobs. And to me, it's almost inconceivable that this hasn't been seen. But for one reason or another, different agendas. The Israelis have agendas, the Palestinians have agendas, the Jordanians have their agenda. And they just have not been able to cooperate. But I believe that once we create this vehicle where they're cooperating on this issue, it's going to spill over into cooperating on many issues. That's all that's required, is one good, solid issue that works. And this is going to bring an incredible amount of capital into the area. Everybody, all the Arab communities are going to want to have a condo in this area. And so that's our plan, that's our hope. And this is the time for it to happen. This is the time when the old ways that haven't worked, the Oslo Accords they've been trying to get, which is, of course, land for peace. And the reality is that it's development for peace that will bring the answer. Development that causes all of the three stakeholders to prosper.
And in the process, the prophet Ezekiel, who spoke thousands of years ago, his words will come to pass.
He's the key. 6 verses, Ezekiel 47, 6 through 12, will be fulfilled by simply bringing this pipe through there. And I believe it's what we call an environmental peace plan that will save the area.